Hello, and welcome to my channel where I offer fun guided art tutorials on the Procreate app using an iPad. I put out new videos twice a week, so if you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. If you have any ideas for me on how I can better my channel, please leave it down in the comments below. All right, let's get into it. Step number one, we're going to be creating a new screen size canvas. Step number two, we're going to download the color palette from the description box below. And step number three, we're going to be working on the sky and the horizon. So once you have downloaded the custom palette that I've created, the first color on the palette we're going to drag and drop into the background. Using a round brush in the painting section, we're going to be grabbing the fourth color, a dark blue, on the palette. Using a fairly large brush size, I'm just going to darken up the top edge of our canvas. Using the second color on the palette, a light blue, we're going to lighten up where the horizon line is going to be. Next, I take the smudge tool, a fairly large size brush, and we're going to blend these three colors together. In our layers section, I add a second layer on top. Using that same dark blue color, so this is the fourth color on the palette, with a syrup brush from the inking section, I draw a horizon line. So draw the line and then hold for it to become a perfectly straight line. Going back to that round brush we first used, I just fill in below that horizon line. You can drag and drop the color at this point. I do it this way just so I can keep track of where I'm at with my different layering. I also add a little bit of darker color above the horizon line, that original line that we drew. I do like using the round brushes to fill in the areas because it is a little bit more blotchier and it adds more character rather than just dragging the color into the space. Next, I take the inking brush with white and I'm just adding a couple white caps. Not overdoing it, just 3. Step number 4, we're going to be working on our first wave. Going into our layers section, we add a third layer. And we're going to be grabbing the 5th color on the top row of the palette. And I start by using that inking brush. And I kind of roughly put in a wave line. And then I use the same technique as we did with the very first horizon line. And I fill it in with that round brush. So there's 2 green colors towards the ends of the row on the palette on the top row. We use both of those colors to kind of just blotch in some variation. This just creates depth and makes the image a little bit more interesting to the eye. We're going to click that layer and you can go back to see what I clicked, but it's called Alpha Lock. When you click the layer on the left-hand side, it locks that layer in place so that you can here, what we're doing is smudging the colors together, but not blending it in with the rest of the painting. So I add in their layers section another layer on top of this. And I'm going to be adding the whites of the waves using an inking brush and the color white. So we're going to try to avoid any hard, definitive lines. We kind of want it to be loose, a little bit scribbly, some dotted, lighter lines as well. And what I'm doing is I'm establishing the shape that we're going to use, and then we're going to drag and drop that white into that space. Next, I grab a gray color next to the white on the top row of the palette. And we're just going to roughly etch in some gray just to create some like shadowing and depth. You can leave it like this if you like that illustrated look. Or what I do in the next little bit is I take that smudge tool and I just loosely smudge out the top of those lines. I'm just playing with the look here. You can do whatever you think looks good. Just adding a few extra little dots here and there. And this is where I take that smudge tool and kind of blend and play around with some different looks. You can see that I kind of dragged that white color up in a few spots. No, I wasn't too crazy on it, so I didn't do it in too many places, but it kind of gives that splashing effect. All right, so I'm in layer number 5. I added a 5th layer, and we're going to be working on the second wave. So I grabbed that kind of 5th color, that greeny, dark green, swampy color. And same exact thing we're going to do here. This wave is more of a straight line at the top. So I just kind of do something like a rough straight line, and then I fill in again with that round brush. Since this wave is more in the forefront, so we're going to be able to see it more clearly, we're going to add a little bit more detail to it. I use that round brush, and you can see that I was using an up and down stroking motion, and that is to add that texture of the wave falling forward. I grabbed that lighter green color, so we're using the exact same colors we used on that back wave. Using that up and down motion. And then we click it, we alpha lock it, and we're going to smudge a few places out. We don't want to be able to see the splotching too much of where we put our paint. All right, so next I go and I add another layer again, and we're going to take that syrup brush. So far we've only used 2 different brushes with white. And we're going to add, instead of the white at the top of the wave like we did before, the white's going to be towards the bottom of the wave, signifying that the wave has crashed down. Once you've established your shapes, you just drag and drop the white color to fill. And then I add with a very, very fine brush, the inking brush, I put a little bit of white at the top of that wave, just to distinguish more from the front and the back wave. And again, I take that gray color and we just put in some shadowing. It just gives that wave a little bit more depth. We alpha lock it, and then we can smudge out that gray a little bit using the up and down motion. So the next thing I do here, I'm gonna be taking that alpha lock off and I'm gonna be smudging the white into the wave more. I thought it looked a little bit too rigid. Again, if you like the illustrated version of it, you can keep it how it was. Step number 5, we're going to be working on the shore and more of the water detail. Okay, so we're going to be adding shadowing underneath this wave. So I added a new layer and I moved it underneath or below the wave layers, so that when we paint, it's going to show up behind or underneath the wave, as you can see here. So I start with that same dark turquoise color that we used for the wave, and I end up using a darker color afterwards just to add a little bit more shadowing, but that was the 5th color on the palette. And then I take that light green color, the very last color on the top row of the palette. And then this is where I take that dark blue color, the 4th color on the top row. And we're going to focus on like adding a little bit more depth and shadowing underneath that wave. And don't worry how it looks now, because we're going to kind of be smudging the colors together so it looks a little bit nicer. I take a light blue color, so we're just kind of regurgitating, for lack of a better word. We're reusing some of the colors we've used. The light blue color is the 2nd one on the palette, and I'm just carrying it forth down into the shoreline. And then what we're doing is the 2nd line or the middle line on the palette are all the colors that we're going to be using for the shoreline. And I use them one by one, starting with the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd. And then the further down we move, we use the next color on the palette. So that last color we use should be the last color on the middle row of the palette. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do that smudging action that we talked about a little bit earlier. So selecting the smudge tool at the top of the menu, we're going to alpha lock our layer that we were just working in, so the shoreline. This is where I kind of blend some of those colors together. So selecting a new layer, so I'm in layer number 8. We're going to start adding the whites, kind of like the white foaming kind of on the beach you would see. Keep in mind that we want really long shapes when we're drawing them. So I'm starting with the biggest area of white, which would be closest to the bottom of the canvas. And then we're going to be really lightly kind of etching in some other white spots. I'm focusing right now underneath the waves. You might need to play around with this a couple times. I'm not going to lie, this was not my first attempt. But once you get something that you kind of like, you kind of get the hang of it quickly. I noticed too that less does look better than overdoing it, but again, it's totally whatever your preference is. So next I grab that gray color, which is next to the white, and we're going to do kind of the same thing we did with the waves. So we don't want just a big white blob at the bottom of our canvas. We're going to add a little bit of shadowing and depth to it with that gray color. I put it in a few other select spots and then we kind of smudge it out a bit. So I just add a couple more little details, and that's pretty much it for this one. So thanks for following along, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks everyone. Bye.